When the top negotiating teams from the EU and the UK come face to face over Brexit, there's one noticeable difference between them: the gender balance. While there's a fairly even mix in the EU group, in the UK team of 9, there is just one woman. Well, joining me to discuss are Charlotte O'Brien, who's a senior lecturer in law at the University of York, and Miriam Gonzalez, a lawyer who specialises in Brexit and trade policy and who's acted as a lead EU negotiator. Good morning to you both, and thank you for joining us. And Charlotte O'Brien, if I could start with you, do you think this is a problem then, that there is only one woman on this negotiating team?
Yes, I certainly do think it's a problem. I think representativeness is really, really important. It's not just about optics. It's not just about taking the right photo that looks like it's diverse or politically correct. It's about the quality of law that ensues, the quality of the decisions that are made. When you screen out women's voices, concerns that are very pertinent to women get overlooked. We've seen time and time again with male legislators, with male judges, with male decision makers, decisions being made that disadvantage women in many ways. And an example would be, in fact, David Cameron's negotiating team back in early 2016, where there were 6 people involved, all men, and they came back with a deal that wasn't particularly popular, but the one headline of it was that it created an in-work benefit break that disproportionately would have impacted upon working mothers.
Miriam Gonzalez, do you see the points that Charlotte O'Brien is making there, that women, if you screen out women's voices, you may get a decision or legislation that does not benefit women?
I think that it is a little bit difficult to make assumptions on this issue of the lack of gender representation simply because of how that particular team was designed. And in order to understand whether there is a real problem or not, we would need to look at the numbers and the gender diversity in the Brexit department in the administration, just to know whether there is any real lack of diversity from everybody working there, or whether it happens to be that the negotiating team for this particular chapter, there wasn't that gender balance because the people who happen to have the specialization on the finances and the rights of EU citizens, which is what is being negotiated right now, happen to be men or not. But what I do think, though, having been negotiating some bilateral trade agreements myself, is that it is true that at the end of the day, the agreements need to be negotiated by people, and you need to create a positive dynamic at a personal level between those teams, and it is easier to do that if you have a diverse team, because then you are more adaptable. And I think that there is also some merit in trying to mirror a little bit the diversity of the other team, in this case the European team. Where I do have a fundamental difference, though, in relation to what Charlotte was saying, is that I do not really think that it necessarily brings more quality. If anything, I think that what we have seen in the Brexit negotiations so far is that the incompetence knows no gender, no? And some of the incompetent decisions by men like David Davis are as bad as the incompetent decisions by women like Theresa May.
I would say, Charlotte, incompetence knows no gender, and what you're looking for really is the best person for the job, aren't you, whether it's a man or a woman?
Absolutely. And I think if you select from a narrow pool, you are narrowing your chances of getting the best people for the job. I mean, I agree with what Miriam's saying, that you do need the best people for the job. And these negotiations involve a set of specialist skills. But simply saying that we have a very narrow pool of people to select from, it's self-fulfilling exclusion, because if you recruit from a pool of people that you have previously recruited, if you have created a pool that is all men, that suggests that the problem is bigger and anterior to the creation of the negotiating panel. It goes into, the department, it goes into the structure of government, it goes into the structure of decision making. And just a quick point about the idea that there are, these narrow sets of skills. We should point out that since Friday's announcement about the UK Supreme Court, the negotiation panel will now have the dubious accolade of a worse gender balance than the UK Supreme Court. And selecting Supreme Court judges, you're selecting from an extremely narrow pool. I mean, surely they can do better than this.
And Miriam Gonzalez, I just want to ask you, as a lawyer and an EU negotiator, do women negotiate in a different way than men? We're told, when it comes to investing and making financial decisions, that women are more risk averse than men.
I really have not had any experience where I have seen that gender made a huge difference in terms of how agreements are negotiated. I think that it really depends on the technical knowledge of the people. It depends on the emotional intelligence of the people. It is certainly true that the more diverse that your team is, but that is not only gender, it's diversity in every respect, the more adaptable you are, and therefore the easier it is to negotiate. But we should not forget that at the end of the day, that UK negotiating team reports to a woman, reports to the Prime Minister, Theresa May. So I really do not think that we can make too many assumptions. When we look at the pool is the Brexit Parliament and the UK permanent representation. And I personally haven't seen the numbers in terms of gender diversity in those organisations. Perhaps we should look at them.
Yeah, Miriam Gonzalez, just staying with you, and Charlotte O'Brien made this point that there are fewer senior women up in the higher ranks of the civil service. When you've got most civil servants are female, 11% are from ethnic minorities, but there are very few women when you get to the higher ranks. And does this not highlight a much bigger problem?
But that's the situation everywhere. Whenever we look at the top of any organization, of any profession, it doesn't matter whether it's the civil service or anything else, women tend to score less than 10%. So we have a gap there in representation. It doesn't happen only to the Brexit negotiating team.
And Charlotte O'Brien, just picking up from what Miriam Gonzalez said a little earlier, the person at the top is the Prime Minister, is Theresa May, and she is a woman.
Yes, I don't think that really mitigates the problem sufficiently, because what we don't have are women at the table. And while I agree with what Miriam says, that skills they can cross gender, it's not necessarily about having people who are more likely to be risk averse or more likely to strike better deals or more likely to negotiate better. It's about the objectives that are set. It's about the things that the negotiators will decide can be dispensed with because they don't really matter that much. It's about the things that the negotiators will agree to in terms of conditions, whether it comes to conditions attached to trade, like workplace rights, which impact very significantly upon women, and so forth.
Well, listen, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. That was Charlotte O'Brien, Senior Lecturer in Law at the University of York. And we also heard from Miriam Gonzalez, a lawyer who specialises in Brexit.